I'd like to give an explanation to Essential Question 3, Version 3, in the fall of 2011. So let's take a look at the first question, which is, what is the internal rate of return of asset A? What you're doing is you're taking a peek at A's value, and you're saying, well, look, it gives you $10 in time period 0, $30 in time period 4. You're trying to find the interest rate that makes the present worth of that equal to 0. Now you can set up the present worth equation and set it equal to 0, minus 10 plus 30 on 1 plus I to the fourth, and solve. But because this is one of those simple ones where there's only a single value in time period 0 and then another value out here in time period 4, you can use that simple little equation, which is just what is 30 on 10 raised to the 1 on the nth power, where n is where you have that final value, and subtracting 1, and that should give you the interest rate. The interest rate is 31.61%. So we'll go ahead and pop that in right there if you want to. Now the second question requires you to calculate some annual worths. All you're doing is taking the present worth that is already calculated for you and stretching it out on the life of the asset, which is in this column. And what's interesting to note here is that you've only got a life of 4, a life of 2, and a life of 3. So you need to calculate 4 annual worth coefficients that are there. But for example, what you're going to be doing with say asset B. Asset B has a present worth of present worth of $10.18. So what you're going to do is you're going to look for A, give you know P. Interest rate is going to be 10%. And the N is going to be the life of the asset, and so that's going to be the 2 years. It's right there. And this calculation will give you the annual worth. The answer to this question is that, well, you need to find the one with the highest annual worth. And that's the key thing that you can do when you have all your assets having lives, which are factors right here of the planning horizon, and at the same time you're supposed to provide service. The implication is you buy, say, one of asset 1, let it burn out and get another one, and so on down the line. The question number 3 is, at what minimum acceptable rate of return of 10 and no service requirement, which asset would you choose? Be sure to explain why. This one is one of the easy ones because all you're doing right here is actually just applying the present worth criteria. And so what this one's saying is well, which ones has the biggest present worth? And you say, oh, it's A, and you say it's A because it has the highest present worth. And that's the easiest bit. The final question, question number 4, is what happens when the minimum acceptable rate of return is 20%? So what's going on here is that I'm forcing you to use the incremental internal rate of return exclusive choice criteria. So let's head back up to our table and see how to do this. So the first thing we're going to do is remember that the internal rate of return on asset A was 31.61. And essentially step 1 is to make it so that you order your assets from lowest initial investment to highest. So what you're looking at is you see that B is cheapest, so that'll be the first one you look at. And then you start looking at C, then you start looking at A, and then you start looking at D. So step 1, after you've ordered them, is to wipe out all assets that have internal rates of return less than minimum acceptable. Well, that means asset D has to go, so let's scratch that one off the list. And we know that's one of the ones that, since it isn't acceptable, you know it's not going to be the best. So let's go ahead and start with asset A. And we're going to check and see if we can upgrade from A to B. You see how B is just a tinge more expensive? And so we're checking to see what is the return on that extra dollar that you invest in order to upgrade from A to B. And you check that, from B to C. So let's check that BC increment over here, and it's negative 6.49%. Well, that's less than 20. So you know that C is not a good upgrade to make from B. So you're going to go ahead and stick with B. So the next thing you do is you go ahead and see if you should upgrade from B to A. Well, you check that BA increment, so you head on over here and you find out that's 10.76%. Well, 10.76% is less than 20, which is what our minimum acceptable rate of return is. And so we find that we should not, in fact, upgrade to A. So the one that remains is B. So B is the best choice when the minimum acceptable rate of return is 20, according to this criteria. Now remember, this isn't exactly true because, well, if you look at these assets, A couple of them are going to have double internal rates of return, and I just put 1 in that table right there. Anyway, so this is the explanation to essential question number 3, version 3, fall of 2011. But I just want to make sure I show you what the annual worths are after they've been calculated. Here's the back page, and you'll see that, you know, the internal rate of return is the 31.61 we talked about. And here's how the annual worths end up calculating themselves out. That's why I said B was the best one, because, well, it had the highest annual worth, and it did by a long ways. Anyway, again, thanks for listening to the answer to the question.